Kyodo News English World。
皆さんこんにちは。こちらは共同通信英文記者のポッドキャストです。英文記者は国内外で起きている出来事について取材してオリジナルの英文記事を発信したり、日本語のニュースを英語に翻訳したりしています。共同通信の英語の記事をテーマにさまざまな国から集まる仲間たちと英語と日本語を交えてディスカッションしていけたらと思っています。今日は3人の記者でお届けします。Hi there everybody, my name is Eduardo Martinez and I've been here at Kyodo News for nearly 5 years now. I'm originally from Brisbane, Australia. It's nice to meet you.
Hello everyone, my name is Toma and I've been at Kyodo News for 7 years now. I am a massive bookworm and I would like to recommend Homegoing by Yajasi. よろしくお願いします。
Hi everyone, I'm Xincheng, originally from China, and I've been working at Kyodo News for 12 years, covering markets, companies, and a range of business and economic issues. よろしくお願いします。
ありがとうございます。So for today's episode, we will be talking about the tougher requirements proposed by Japan's immigration agency for permanent residency for foreigners. So-san, can you read the title for us, please?
Okay.Japan proposes tougher income pension rules for permanent residency.
ありがとうございます。出入国在留管理庁が今月の頭に外国人の永住許可要件の新たなガイドライン案を公表したという話ですね。
そうですね。
では最初の数パラをお願いします。
はい。Japan's immigration agency proposed tougher requirements for granting permanent residency to foreigners.including requiring applicants to maintain income above the average for Japanese households and a certain level of projected pension benefits. The proposed guidelines are part of Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's push to create an orderly society in which Japanese and foreign nationals coexist while cracking down on illegal activities.
ありがとうございます。永住許可要件には新たに年収が日本人世帯の平均を上回ること、年金受給見込み額の基準と一定の日本語能力を求めることが追加されました。審査を厳しくすることで今後特定の在留資格に人数上限を設けることも議論されるそうです。So Ed, can you first tell us why you wanted to cover this topic?Yeah,
so the reason why I've been quite interested on this topic was basically starting with the changes to the business manager visa requirements last year. So last August, the government proposed to increase the capital requirement to apply for this visa from 5 million yen up sixfold to 30 million yen. And so that proposal through to its enactment, that process took only about a couple of months. And within that couple of months, it really forced a lot of people here on this visa or who were planning to run businesses or already had businesses open to really rethink their futures here in Japan, and has even forced some people to leave because they were not expecting those requirement changes. So there's been a host of changes to requirements for several different kinds of visa. And now with these changes to permanent residency requirements, we can see that about 947,000 people in Japan currently hold it. And on that business manager visa, there were about 450,000 foreigners who held it as of the end of June 2025. So it seems that these changes to the permanent residency requirements are going to affect a far greater scope of people.
So why are these changes happening?Well,
as we can see, what the Japanese government has said is the changes are in order to create an orderly society and also crack down on illegal activities. So there have been reports, of course, of some foreigners misusing public services and claims that people take advantage of social welfare benefits once they obtain permanent residency. But I also would like to question, why someone would struggle to work in Japan for a period of 10 years just to take advantage of those benefits.
Okay, so how does it compare?to permanent residency requirements in other countries?
Many countries consider income, language ability, and the length of residence. What stands out in Japan's proposal is the use of average household income and projected pension benefits, which could create a relatively high hurdle for some applicants.
Yeah, so we can see that we have a quote from a foreign resident from Southeast Asia who came here, who's been here for around 20 years and is in her 30s, who said that she simply doesn't have that kind of money and that she feels stressed. So as So-san said, it's quite a challenge for anyone to be able to be earning more than the average Japanese household. So if, say, a regular Japanese person could also not meet these requirements. I would imagine a lot of foreigners here would, of course, like to meet them in some way, but then that calls into question what jobs exactly are available in which they are able to earn the money to meet these requirements.
Some long-term residents feel the new rules are unfair because they have already spent many years working, paying taxes, and building their lives in Japan.
So what are the likelihood that these revisions will be changed?
Well, simply looking at the way in which the speed in which the business manager visa changes were brought about, and that it seems as though this process is being enacted in a very similar way, that they are collecting public comments and then will enact the rules from October. So just simply having that precedent gives me the notion that these changes are all but certain. And people who were considering applying for permanent residency but have not yet done so may now need to begin to question what their long-term future is here in Japan.
So how could this change the demographic makeup of foreigners in the country in the coming years?
It seems as though we're seeing a push from the government to make it more difficult for foreigners to be here long-term. But at the same time, they are, for example, trying to introduce a 5-year period of stay for specific skilled worker number 2 visa holders. So this may suggest that while, of course, Japan has this chronic labor shortage which needs to be addressed, it may do that by bringing in more temporary workers, while long-term residents may simply not have the option to remain living in Japan unless they are tied to full-time employment.
Japan may attract more highly paid professionals, but fewer people who are able or willing to build permanent lives in Japan.
So what do these changes mean for the average white-collar foreign worker in Japan?
I think highly paid workers may not be greatly affected, but people on moderate salaries could find it much harder to qualify. This may be especially difficult for employees at smaller companies, people living outside major cities, and those with shorter pension contribution records.
That's a very valid point, So-san. So according to some government statistics, average income per household in Japan stood at 5.75 million yen in 2024. And so that is for the whole country. So the average person living outside of Tokyo, for example, in a small city, is going to have a far harder time to make that amount of money than someone in Tokyo. Even within Tokyo as well, there are a lot of people who may not be able to meet these requirements, as So-san has just mentioned. Unless you're working in an executive position for a foreign company, there are a lot of people who will simply not meet these requirements, as well as the projected 30-year pension system. So for people in different age groups as well, if you're still in your 20s and your 30s, you still may have a long time to go before you're able to meet those requirements. So that may really force people to really question, what is the point of staying in Japan for all this amount of time if they will have to struggle to meet these requirements for potentially much longer than they anticipated to be able to apply for permanent residency. With some people I have interviewed, not for the permanent residency issue, but for the business manager visa, there are foreigners here on different circumstances. Some of us come from countries that are more relatively stable, but there are other people, for example, that come from countries that are in conflict right now, and it would pose a real risk for them to return. So it really complicates matters for them, deciding whether they can really try to stay here in Japan or whether they have to face going back home to more uncertainty.
では、そろそろ時間になってきました。共同通信では、ジャパンワイヤー by 共同ニュースというサイトで、日本や世界で起きた出来事について英語のニュースを発信しています。今日ご紹介した記事も掲載されていますので、ぜひチェックしてみてください。それでは皆さん、See you next time!